Hello and welcome to GuyLogic. My name is Temco and today we are taking a look at a game called Inside. Now if you have not heard of Inside, that is okay. You may have heard of the developer's previous title, Limbo, one of the gems of indie titles that came out in 2011 and still stands as a triumph in the puzzle platform genre. So here we are 5 years after the date, or 6 years after the date almost, and here we have Inside. A side-scrolling, atmospheric, very dark and grimy puzzle platformer. And is it any good, you might ask? Well, let's go ahead and dive into the options and settings and stuff like that, and then show you about the first 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay. Now, I've tried to minimize spoilers as best I can, but keep in mind, every single screen of this game is in essence a spoiler. Now, the game is right around 2.5 to 3 hours long. You may take a little bit longer if you have some difficulty with the puzzles, but I finished the game from start to finish in 3 hours, and that seems to be about right. Let's go ahead and check some options and settings, and I can be very quick on this. Inside does not have mouse support in the menus, or it doesn't actually need a mouse at all. The game is either played by a controller or a keyboard and just use WASD and 2 action buttons for jumping and grabbing onto things. And if you're using a keypad, which is something I do recommend with this game because the keyboard controls just do not have the precise mechanics you might need compared to a analog stick on a Xbox or PlayStation controller. I personally used a Steam controller, which worked absolutely fine, but no mouse control in the Windows for the menus and stuff like that is a negative mark against the title. Graphics wise, the game doesn't really have any graphics options. It has full screen on or off, though the game default on full screen looks to be windowed full screen and not actual full screen, which is a bit weird. Resolution, it does have quite a few resolutions under the sun, which is fine, and you can change the brightness down below as you deem fit. I've put it up a little bit higher because as often I notice most of these diamond and grimy games that have dark corners make them too dark, which I feel loses some of the luster in the title for me personally. But your opinion may vary again, and you can change that should you so desire. The keyboard controls are rebindable, which is pretty good, even though there's a mouse controller. It has vibration on or off, and that's really it. That's your control set, non-rebindable, which is normal, and one volume slider. Now, there's no dialogue in the game. There is nothing like voiceovers in the game. But there is atmospheric sounds, there is gameplay sounds, and there is music, so it would have been nice to have multiple sliders for those. And not having those is a bit of a disappointment. Like colorblind mode or something like that really doesn't apply to this game. One, because it is mostly black on white with some colors spotted in, much like Limbo was. So going saying colorblind doesn't really work because the game barely has any color to speak of. It would have been nice to include that for the shades that are there, but they're generally not as important because everything is quite clear and indicative due to the play on light and dark in the game. So, having said all of that, let me go ahead and show you a bunch of gameplay. Now, this is the first 10 to 15 minutes. I've completed the game, gone back to the start. And one of the very cool things I just want to show you right off the bat is that the game actually starts you in the game. Which is, the game instantly starts. There is no loading menu, there's no selection menu. You just load in the game. And if you want the menu, just press escape or press the start button on your gamepad. It is pretty cool. So let me go ahead and skip to the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game and tell you what the game is all about. Because even though the options menu might be lackluster, I can tell you the game is anything but. Much like playdeads' original title, Limbo, Inside uses a combination of light and dark with atmospheric background settings. Now, unlike Limbo's very fantasy style with a giant spider and all that stuff, this game is more set in a weird sci-fi dystopian future universe. It's weird, don't get me wrong, and the story takes quite a few twists and turns to keep you on your toes, which makes it phenomenal in that regard as well. Now, gameplay-wise, the mechanics aren't exactly complex. As I said, you've got movement, jumping, and grabbing onto things. And most of your gameplay is just going from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. And sometimes you may have to go to the right side of the screen instead of the left side of the screen. And there's a couple of stairs up and down you climb, which is where the complexity of the mechanic ends. All of the puzzles, bar a few, are basically logic puzzles. Figure out how to get to the button, figure out how to add this new mechanic they introduce. There are, and now I don't want to spoil the story in any regard because there are quite a few very interesting and cool things in this. But there's a couple of things you need to know and note about this game in regards to its control scheme and the way it tells its story to fully understand whether or not it's a game for you. Because as I said, the game is bloody phenomenal. It's a tight, well-paced, extremely well-paced, there is not a dull moment in the game, very suspenseful, very cool story-driven puzzle platformer. The aesthetic, the world, the characters, everything down to the last nuance used to color the shirt of a character, a background animation. Everything serves a purpose in either informing you about mechanics to give you cues, inform you about objectives to help you along with puzzles, or to highlight something about the world and the story. And they've done such a fine job of this that I finished this game in one whole sitting. I literally sat down and did not let go of my controller until I was done, which is something I have not had in a very long time in regards to any game, let alone a puzzle platformer, a genre I typically avoid because they're boring. But the puzzles in this game weren't the focal point. It wasn't about making the puzzles as complex as possible or as difficult as possible for your player to figure out. It wasn't about trying to make things hard for hard's sake. Limbo had some of that, and the developer has listened and corrected basically every issue I have had personally with Limbo in regards to this title. Yes, the black and white was cool, but add some detail, add some color. And Inside has ticked off all of those boxes. Now, if you are not a fan of story-driven experiences, this game still offers something quite unique. And as I said, the pacing in this game is phenomenal. Bar nothing, the pacing in this game is absolutely fantastic. Every single interactive moment, be it dragging a crate, be it avoiding hounds, be it jumping a ledge, be it diving into a river, every single bit is paced in such a way as to build suspense. And the music that accompanies you, both gameplay sounds, interactive sounds from hounds, interactive sounds from enemy NPCs, but also background sounds from thuds and toms somewhere in the machinery, somewhere in the forest, somewhere in the world, accompanied with sublime music that just builds that tension. All of that combined with a absolutely fantastic control on how long an action should take and how the player should feel claustrophobic almost, rushed, and very nervous that something is barely succeeding. And you're a small boy, lost in this great world, trying to escape, trying to run away, trying to find out what is going on. But you're still a boy. You don't really have any special strength or special power. So the very tension you feel every time a character runs by, and every time you miss a puzzle, or you miss a jump, or you miss a clue, it doesn't punish you by sending you back 10, 15, 20 minutes in game time. It sends you back a room or two, because every single action you take progresses the interactivity, and once a puzzle has been solved, there's no more challenge left in that. And the game understands that inherently well, because once you solve a puzzle, you know how to solve it. Sending you back 5 puzzles because you missed a puzzle down the line serves zero purpose outside of frustrating and annoying the player. And the game doesn't do that, which is really well. I really wish more, especially puzzle platformers, but more games in general, would take cues from this and understand where to draw the line between challenge and annoyance. And Inside has done a phenomenal job in all regards to that. Tightly controlled puzzles, tightly controlled pacing with very, very, very well done atmosphere combines in this little indie title that is in essence better than Limbo was, and that is high praise indeed. The world is dark, the world is grim, and it doesn't hold punches in having your little child body mangled by hounds, being shot, or any other bunch of gruesome deaths you can experience. It just casually touts that in your face, and it doesn't really care. Obviously, if you die, you respawn about a minute back most of the time. Sometimes you may have to redo one sequence, but again, it doesn't put you back too far because it has quite a few checkpoints to prevent that from happening. Now, I'm praising this game to high heaven at this point because I'm recording this about an hour after finishing the title fully and gathering my thoughts on it. And I'm still euphoric from the fact that this game was able to deliver from start to finish an absolutely phenomenal experience. If I had to compare it to an experience of a large game that did something like this, it would have to be the original Portal. A game that touted itself as a simple platformer, a physics puzzler, and where you ended up with one of the most memorable games ever. Limbo already did that. Limbo is one of the most memorable games we've had in the last decade, in terms of aesthetic, in terms of achieving its goals, and in terms of being designed for one purpose and executing that purpose to near perfection. It's taken the developer 5 years, but with Inside, they've taken all that they knew from Limbo, applied it, and refined it, because Inside just adds that little bit extra. It adds that little bit extra mechanical complexity. It adds that little bit extra detail and nuance to the world and the characters. It adds something Limbo didn't have, a very, very excellent ending. It nails it on every step of the way. It leaves you wondering and questioning, but it doesn't leave you confused. It leaves you wondering how all these set pieces came to be, what the history is, what actions have led to this entire thing happening. And in the same time, it gives you satisfaction because it's done and you have achieved that goal and it ends. It doesn't stretch itself out. It doesn't introduce tedium that we know from many AAA titles just for having longevity for longevity's sake and content from content's sake. And again, I'm back to praising this title from high heaven. So I want to make some critique on some of the points that I feel the game is definitely lackluster. And there are a few, because it's not a perfect game. No game really ever is. And one of the things that I found particularly annoying in this title is the fact that because the way they try to tone down mechanics down to just 2 buttons, sometimes it was really difficult to precisely aim somewhere, precisely control an action, which just led to a little bit more tedium than was necessary. So in their search to simplify control schemes, they may have gone too far and lost key functionality in certain situations. Now, another thing I do find kind of annoying is the fact that even though the game is very much about the difference between light and dark and highlighting certain elements and sectors to a ridiculous degree, there are still parts of the world where I feel that they just don't have the proper highlighting. They don't have the proper indications either to the player or in general to showcase something in the world. Now, obviously, these are nitpicky little things because there's very little to criticize the game for outside of the shoddy options menu and lack of mouse control in the menus, but that's purely a technical thing for the PC market. In a gameplay sense, the game sets out to be a dark and grimy atmospheric puzzle platformer, and it does that from top to bottom to near perfection. The game is coming out for a price point of 20 euros or your regional equivalent. And you might consider, rightfully so, that that might be a price too high for what is in essence a game with about 3 hours of content and very little replayability. There's some replayability, there's some secrets and hidden areas, but other than that, there is very little replayability in the title. So you might wonder, is that worth the money? Now, 20 euros, the price might be a little bit too steep for your taste, and you might want to wait on a sale. But if you have the disposable income for a $20 purchase or €20 purchase, then Limbo is worth every penny you put into it because hot damn, this game is bloody phenomenal. This game just went up in one of my favorite games of all time, and that is high praise indeed. So, Inside is phenomenal. Inside is out on Steam for 20 euros or your regional equivalent, and you should definitely check it out for yourself because it is worth all your time and effort. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, press the like button below. If you didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And leave a comment. Tell us what you like. Tell us what we can do better. We want to hear back from all of you. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. So until next time, right here on GuyLogic.